So here's a recap of the product and quotient rules in section 3.3 in our textbook. This is just a recap. It doesn't replace actually reading the textbook. So let's go through the product and quotient rules. So first, the product rule, and I should have written that up here. Product rule. So we have to start with differentiable functions. So if f and g are differentiable functions, we want to be able to take the derivative of the product of two functions. So we saw in class that if we take the derivative of, say, w squared times w cubed, it is not the same as the derivative of w squared times the derivative of w cubed. We have to actually multiply them out or come up with some other method. So the product rule is a little bit more complicated. We can't just take f prime times g prime. In order to take the derivative of f times g, we take the derivative of f of x times g of x. Notice that g of x is left alone. I don't take the derivative there. So you take the derivative of f of x times g of x by itself, plus, well, let's leave f of x alone this time, and then multiply times the derivative of g of x. So we only take the derivative of one function at a time. So this d by dx notation might seem cumbersome. So to write it a little bit more simply, f times g prime is equal to, I can't just distribute the prime, I have to use this funny rule. F times g prime equals f prime times g plus f times g prime. Now the reason I didn't write it like this in the first place is because the notation is a little bit sloppy, and the one above is more precise. But the notation in red is a little bit cleaner to memorize. So to take the derivative of a product, I take the derivative of each function separately. A little bit later on a separate video, I'll give you some examples of using the product rule. So the other one is the quotient rule. Again, we have to start out with two differentiable functions, and I want to find the derivative of their quotient. So I want to find the derivative with respect to x of f of x over g of x. And to find the derivative of a quotient, it's more complicated than the product. So we take the derivative of the first function times the second function, minus the first function times the derivative of the second, divided by the second function squared. So it is actually quite a bit more complicated. Let's actually write this with the prime notation, and maybe it'll be a little bit cleaner. So here on the left, we have the derivative of the quotient, f over g prime. And now in the numerator, notice I sort of start the same way as the product. I take f prime times g by itself. Take the derivative of f times g by itself. This time I'm going to subtract f times g prime. Instead of adding, I'm going to subtract f times g prime. So the order that you find the derivatives really matters in the numerator. And then we divide by the denominator squared. Okay, so in a couple other videos, we'll have examples of how to use the quotient rule. Now, your book does a nice job of deriving the quotient rule from the product rule. That might make it make a little bit more sense.